In this video, I'll be talking about 9-6, finding common denominators. Today's lesson is really similar to 9-5, in which we found the least common multiple or a common multiple. And the reason they're similar is because to find common denominators, we need to find common multiples. So for example, if I were to try and find a common denominator for 2/3 and 3/4, what I would need to do is find a multiple of 3 and 4 that they have in common so that my denominators could be the same. So 3 and 4, I'm going to go ahead and list out some multiples of 3 and 4. Multiples of 3, remember the first multiple is always itself. 3 times 1 is 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. I'll just stop there for now. Multiples of 4 include 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. So, looking at my list, I'm going to circle things that they have in common. It looks like so far on this list all they have in common is 12. If I kept going naming more multiples of each, I would get more common multiples of 3 and 4. But since we just need one common denominator, a common denominator, as long as I have one, I'm good to go. So this means that a common denominator for both of these numbers is 12. I can't just pick any number to be the common denominator. It has to be a multiple. So whenever you hear the phrase common denominator, think of a multiple. Because I can't just add anything to the top or bottom number to change it. Remember, you can only change a denominator by multiplying the fraction on the top and the bottom by the same thing. So to get 12, I can multiply the top and the bottom of 2/3 by 4. And to get 12 on the bottom over here, I can multiply the top and the bottom by 3 to get 4 times 3, 12. So it has to be a multiple because the only way that we can make an equivalent fraction is by multiplying or dividing, but in this case, we'll be multiplying. This says to find a common denominator for the pair of fractions and then rename each fraction. Renaming the fraction means rewriting it with the new denominator that you've chosen. The nice thing about finding a common denominator is that there are many different answers. Let's look at the problem 1/5 and 3/10. So remember, when you hear common denominator, think of multiples because I can only get a new denominator by multiplying or dividing. But in this case, 5 is a prime number, so I can actually only multiply to find an equivalent fraction with a new denominator. Let's think of some multiples of 5 and 10. Multiples of 5 include 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. I'll just stop there for now. And multiples of 10 are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So it looks like they have 10 in common. They also have, on this list, 20 in common and 30 in common. So I have a lot of different choices of what I could make my denominator. 10, 20, 30 could all be common denominators for 1/5 and 3/10. I'm going to go ahead and choose 20. I just picked any number out of those 3 that are circled. You could pick a different one and practice this problem on your own if you'd like some additional practice. Anyways, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and pick 20. So my common denominator is 20. That's the first part of my answer. The second part of my answer is renaming the fractions. It says, then rename each fraction. What that means is turn each fraction into an equivalent fraction with 20 as the denominator. So, what I need to do is figure out what I need to multiply. I'm going to rewrite this over here. I need to figure out what I need to multiply 1/5 by to get a denominator of 20. So, if I have 1/5 and I want to make an equivalent fraction, because I can't just pick any fraction that's not equivalent, I would multiply the bottom by 4, because 5 times 4 is 20. So that means, remember, whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So I'm going to multiply 1 times 4, and I get 4. So 1/5 as a fraction with 20 as the denominator is 4/20. Now let's do the same for 3/10. If I want it to be an equivalent fraction with 20 on the bottom, I need to do 10 times 2 to get to 20. So that means I also need to do times 2 on the top. 3 times 2 is 6. The equivalent fraction for 3/10 that has a denominator of 20 is 6/20. So my answer to this problem is 20 is the common denominator, and I would rename the fractions to 4/20 and 6/20. Let's look at one more example for some practice. Let's look at the problem 2/5 and 1/6. First, we need to find any common denominator. Remember, when you hear the word common denominator, think multiples. So we're going to go ahead and find multiples of 5 and 6, and we're going to find a common multiple. So I guess you really should be thinking of common multiples. Anywho, some multiples of 5 are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And multiples of 6 are 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. I'm going to go through my list here. Again, you could keep going on forever to find more common multiples, but in this case, I'm just going to stop once I see that I have at least one that I could use that both of these numbers have in common. On this list, all they have in common is 30, but that will work for us. So our common denominator, I'll abbreviate that to CD, is 30. That's the first part of our answer. It says then rename each fraction. So the second part of my answer is taking each of my fractions, 2/5 and 1/6, and turning them into an equivalent fraction that has a denominator of 30. To get from 5 to 30, I need to multiply by 6. So whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. 2 times 6 is 12. So my first fraction, 2/5, would be renamed to 12/30. For 1/6, to get from 6 to 30, I multiply by 5. So I need to multiply the top by 5 as well. 1 times 5 is 5. So 1/6 renamed is 5/30. Try this problem on your own. Find a common denominator for 5/8 and 3/4. Then you must rename each fraction, meaning rewrite it so that each fraction has the new common denominator that you chose. So I will be looking for a 2-part answer for this. Write this down on your recording sheet and bring it with you to class tomorrow. Good luck!